Hello, everybody, and welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. I am Chris Peters of FloHockey, joined as always by Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects, and obviously a lot to get to today, so we're not going to waste any time, Cam. We're going to get right into it. It's been a bit of a newsy day, or newsy 24 hours. We're recording this on Thursday, February 5th, Cam, and things have happened. Probably, I would say, one of the wildest 24-hour periods I've experienced since I've been covering the NHL draft. What about you?
Oof, yeah, my phone was burning up yesterday from the Panarin stuff right into the McKenna stuff. I think I probably logged Elliot Friedman level screen time there yesterday. So yeah, it's certainly newsworthy.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and so obviously, we want to cover the news. We cover Gavin McKenna, the good, bad, the indifferent, here on Called Up the Prospects podcast. We spent a lot of time on this player, and if you are living under a rock, you may not know the news, but we're gonna give this to you first with the facts, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about it based on what we know now. And just right off the hop, it's 24 hours since we found out. We know that there's a lot that we don't know, which we'll talk about, and there's a lot of things that we really can't know for a little while. But we're going to talk about it because it is the biggest news that we've seen in a while. So if you did not know, Gavin McKenna, freshman at Penn State University, played in the outdoor game on Saturday, had 2 points in that game. And on Wednesday of this week, it was announced that he was charged with aggravated assault, a Class 1 felony, charged with misdemeanor simple assault, summary charges of harassment and disorderly conduct in an alleged altercation on January 31st, Saturday. He has had his preliminary hearing and will have another hearing on February 11th. According to a police statement by the State College Police, it is alleged that McKenna struck a 21-year-old male in the face during the altercation, resulting in facial injuries requiring corrective surgery. There's been a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors, and other things that are out there in terms of what actually transpired. There are a number of reports, including that there is apparently video of this incident as well. It has not been made public. There's a number of things there. And obviously we know this player in the context of him being a hockey player, but Cam, there's, when we look at something like this, there's obviously a lot of things that we don't know yet and maybe shouldn't be doing yet. So, what are the things, like, as you've been racking your brain, as we're just all kind of trying to learn how to react to this in some way, because it is different. We have not seen a prospect of this magnitude face this kind of situation. Which is, that there are 4 charges, including a felonious aggravated assault charge. And again, it's very important to note, these are charges. They have not been proven in court. There is a long way to go in this process. But what are the things we should not be doing at this moment, Cam Robinson? Be the voice of reason.
Yeah, and I put it out there too the other day or yesterday, is that I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what happened, right? We don't know. We've seen the reports online, the text messages that people are sharing between them, that why this potentially went down the way it did, but we weren't there. We're gonna have to reserve judgment on that until all the facts come out or the charges are dropped. So I think not rushing to judgment on either side, because there's a lot of people that are like rah, like, can I draft him at 0 now, right? Like, this shows character, this shows, truculence, something that he hasn't shown before. And then there's people that are like, he should go to jail, without knowing any of the facts. And aggravated assault, a felony charge, could result in jail time. Do I think that's going to happen in a situation like this? Probably not. That just realistically how elite athletes are treated, and this just from what we're hearing. But again, we can't know. We have no idea how this is going to shake out long term here. What we can do is we can tap into our sources on the team side and see how they're reacting to this. We can, follow it as it goes along, and we can, take in from precedents, other situations that are maybe not the same but somewhat similar a foreign athlete playing in the States getting into legal trouble, or just a college athlete getting into trouble, and how that affects his standing with the university, with the NCAA, with his visa, all those types of things. We can look at what has happened in the past, what could happen now for him in the future. But again, always-standing that that preliminary date coming up on February 11th we're gonna learn a little bit more there, and I'm sure plenty more information is gonna be coming out in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack, and I think so. There's a couple of things to note. Also, Penn State is on a bye week this week. They do not play. There's no decision. No statements from the university at this point, aside from them saying that they're aware of the charges. And yeah, there's a number of different things that are going to kind of come into the process. They next play against the University of Michigan in what was, going to be a super high profile game. Will be either way, but the question is will McKenna be available to play in that game? I think there's a number of things that could still happen in that regard. And part of it is, what is the Penn State University obligated to do or not do? Will they do an investigation? Each university has its own code of conduct and the different policies in place where even, charges and other things are investigated. So there's a lot of that. We'll find out, in the coming weeks. And as you mentioned, that preliminary hearing is going to be very critical, just to know a little bit more about the situation and where things go next. But yeah, the other thing is that he is a Canadian athlete playing in the United States, has now been charged criminally. Again, not proven in court. And what does that mean for his immigration status, other things like that in terms of, and there's a lot of, we're not lawyers, so we can't really tell you what that's going to be, but those are the things that we're talking about. So let's get back into something that we can do. And let's talk a little bit about what people in hockey are saying about this, what people that are in the decision-making process are saying about this. And Cam, I know you've reached out to people. I've reached out to people. Some of them reached out to us to ask questions about different things. What have you heard from teams in terms of how they are reacting to this, and if it changes anything for them at this point?
I'll say that, yeah, I talked to 4 or 5 scouts from different teams within like an hour of it coming out. And then I talked to a couple more today. Generally, the message that I received was, we're going to hold judgment until we find out what the whole story is, right? Like that, basically to a person, that was kind of the crux of it, is that like, we're going to wait and see how this all shakes out and what information comes out. But I would say the overarching theme that most of them kind of brought up to me was, bar fights happen. These things happen. He's a super high profile kid. And so that's going to only amplify the coverage naturally of something like this. And that, generally speaking, if, what is being reported out there is the reason that this happened, the people I'm talking to weren't overly concerned about it, or overly concerned that it would really plague him too much, that it might just be something that goes away fairly quickly and seamlessly when you have, CAA, a massive agency backing you. And if Penn State decides to back him as well publicly, and not suspend him, that maybe this doesn't actually cloud the judgment or the decision-making of teams whatsoever in the long run. We have seen, like you said, we've seen draft eligible players get into some trouble. We've seen more often it's players that are already drafted get into some trouble, and then their teams handle it individually. But a situation like this, it's, some drinks and somebody running their mouth potentially, and somebody, maybe acting rashly and throwing a punch. It's, especially in the world of sport and competitive sport and hockey in general, not complete strangers to a bar fight.
Right. Yeah. So, and that's the thing, is like, I think, the people that I've talked to is like, very similar in that regard. When thinking about the past instances in hockey specifically, because as you mentioned, there are things that have kind of come up outside of hockey. We've seen, players might have their draft stock go down, but it's usually not to, precludes them from being drafted. Mm-hmm. Talking to a few people, I think, there was the controversy over Trevor Connolly, who was kind of in some trouble from his younger days. He still went in the first round. He probably would have gone higher if not for some of those things potentially.
Maybe.
And that's, so that was one thing. The Logan Mailloux one is one where there were criminal charges, and this was while he was in Sweden. It was also a crime of a sexual nature as well, which was a situation that teams, Mailloux had actually said that he was renouncing himself from the draft.
Yeah.
And Montreal still picked him 31st overall. So that was another thing. And then there was the Mitchell Miller incident, something that happened when he was in a juvenile. That did go through courts, and there was, a punishment, and there was other things, and teams had, he ended up getting drafted in the 4th round. Backlash was just incredible after that. And so eventually the Arizona Coyotes at the time renounced his draft rights. Years later, the Boston Bruins tried to sign him as a free agent, and that also drew backlash. Yeah. The other thing that happens in these situations, like when the Habs took Mailloux, there was massive backlash. The Prime Minister weighed in Canada. The owner had to write a letter of apology. I don't think, based on the facts as we know them, I don't think anyone views what is happening with Gavin McKenna even in a similar vein to those issues.
No.
And that's just from talking to sources. They felt that some of those things were harder to get over. Okay. Mm-hmm. They also didn't want to excuse what happened, because it's also, in the end, it is a significant legal charge that they're dealing with. In terms of what this means for Gavin McKenna's outlook as a hockey player, it's hard to know, right? Exactly what it, like, odds are, though, based on your conversations and my conversations, unless additional information comes out that significantly alters the perception of what happened, I don't think this is ultimately going to significantly sidetrack him from being one of the top prospects in the draft. I mean, would you agree with that, I suppose?
I would. And, again, I'll say that I wasn't speaking to any executives who actually have to be the one to pull the trigger at number 1, number 2, number 3. Right. So a great deal of scouts are former players. A great deal of GMs are too, but not all of them. I guess at the end of the day, you will have to weigh out that when you're selecting somebody potentially first overall, that they are going to become the face of your franchise, right? When you're taking someone at number 15 overall, right? You're hoping that they become a good player for you, but you're not going to hinge all of your marketing campaign that next fall on that player. So I do, and this is just me talking out loud, is that I do wonder and expect those conversations to occur, right? When you have, former first overall picks like a Sidney Crosby, right? Who's never even had a whisper of trouble following him. Right. And that's, I'm sure that's what every single team wants the next Sidney Crosby, because he is so perfect, at least in the public eye and on the ice. I wonder if that will come up into play at the very, very top of the draft when it was always going to come down to it, very likely, right? Stenberg versus McKenna. And they're probably going to be weighing all of these. And I'm sure that that'll just be, decision-making in a moment like that will probably come up in those discussions anyways. We'll see if it moves the needle enough for him to actually slip down a spot or two.
Right. And as well as anybody, like, owners are involved in that process when it comes to that top pick. Yep. Perception matters to them. Business matters to them, obviously, first and foremost. But I think that there's a lot of other things that kind of come into play. Here's where, again, this is an unknowable thing, and so the one thing that I'll just say is the things that could impact his draft stock. Does he miss time playing hockey this year because of this? And that is a possibility that we don't know yet. As I mentioned, Penn State on a bye week. That's not a decision they have to make this week. I think it behooves them to wait until the preliminary hearing. I think it also behooves the university to do their own internal investigation, which I imagine that they are, just because of it involving a student. I think they would be doing that regardless of if it was a student athlete or not, let alone somebody high profile. But the other instance that does complicate this matter is that fact that he is a non-US citizen in
Yeah.
the country. And so if, let's say, there is a suspension or something, it's not like he's going to be able to leave the country potentially unless or he's going to be asked to. We don't know that. There's a lot of
Mhm.
things that we don't know about that. But, let's say there's a suspension. Could he go back to Medicine Hat? It's not that simple at this point, especially while this is being adjudicated. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of different things that come into play. In the end, like, from a purely like analyst perspective, we've really never dealt with anything quite like this. I mean, and it is complicated, and I think that's
Yeah.
the thing that people, it's hard for us. It's not something that, obviously, I think if you're watching this, like, hey, we're a little uncomfortable talking about it because there's so much unknown. But
Mhm.
it also is the story of the draft now. You can't cover the NHL draft and not talk about this moment, right? Obviously. So just in terms of just your pure reaction, like, where do we go from here on this one? What I guess there's just a lot of wait and see, isn't there, Cam?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And we're each going to have our own personal opinions on these things too that are going to stay there. They're going to stay personal opinions on this general matter simply because there's no benefit to rushing to make a claim, right? Until we know, right? Because all of a sudden, if it comes out it was more nefarious than being reported on right now, right? Then that doesn't look good on anybody. So it's just at this point, I think that the smartest play for everybody, and that's what NHL teams are doing. I'm sure that's what Penn State's are there. Everyone's just looking at, let's find out all the information before we move forward here. And I think that that's
Yeah.
the best course of action for us and for most people in the media to do. You report on the information that's there without making sweeping, grandiose decisions one way or the other, right? Whether it's rah
Yeah.
rah rah or it's do not draft, like it or he deserves jail or whatever.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to sit in that gray zone until it comes up. But like you said, is that we've just simply never had something like this with a player of his stature in his draft year. We have seen high level players get into trouble post draft, right? Patrick Kane, right? The cab driver incident. There's been some other things that have surfaced around Patrick Kane early on in his career too, right? As a first overall pick,
Right.
but not months before the draft, right? He was already
Right.
selected. And lesser known players getting into trouble too, but the impact on those players and those organizations were far less than it is for Gavin McKenna. And so it is very, very unique. But I, like you, and I've said this to people in my company too, is that like we, as an authority on the draft and prospects in general, it's like, this is the story. And I mentioned that in
Yeah.
that tweet too, is that like his on ice performance and assessments will take a back seat for now. This will be the talking point around Gavin McKenna, obviously, for the immediate future, and that could run all the way to June. And I'm sure it will run all the way to June. We'll see if he can push back enough to have that. It's like, well, let's remember that this is a highly skilled player that we were very much considering for first overall here, and not just one incident off the ice. But it's gonna be swirling around here for sure.
Yeah, no question about it. And, I think there's a number of factors at play that we'll wait and let them play out. But yeah, I mean, it is a tough situation to be sure. And hopefully everything that comes out, we get more answers, we get an understanding, and, we can make better assessments from there. But obviously could not go without addressing what will be the story of the draft season, and certainly one of the wildest that we have covered. So, yeah, very interesting nonetheless. We will continue to follow this very closely.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try to bring as much nuance and serious, obviously seriousness to this as it is that issue. But boy, it is certainly a tough situation for all involved, and there's really no good way to transition out of it, Cam. There's no good way. But we did have some other news yesterday
Big
that
news.
came out, and it did involve a prospect, and it involved a major NHL star in Artemi Panarin getting
Mm-hmm.
traded to the Los Angeles Kings, and part of the return was a first-round draft pick named Liam Greentree.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to that, so let's talk a little bit. Like, the Kings didn't have to. I think a lot of people were underwhelmed by the return, but I mean, there was never going to be a perfect return given a no movement clause, a player that had complete control of his situation. And in the end, I mean, what could the Rangers have done differently? Any thoughts?
Gosh. I mean, yeah, many thoughts really, but Chris Drury, he came out and he said that it was going to be 50 million to extend Panarin. Well, it wasn't 50 million that LA got him extended to, right? 2-year deal. What was it? 11 per. Really interesting, really interesting how it all shook out. And, I woke up, I told you this last night too, off air, is that, I'd had a couple of little nuggets given to me from some pretty locked in sources leading up to that deal. And then in the morning, I got the text saying like, this is really, really close. It's going to get done before the deadline. And so I put that out there and, still like talking to people, like it was like Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay thinks that they're going to get him, like that it's really close on Tampa Bay, like that Florida wasn't out of it, that Washington and some other teams, Dallas, there were some teams that were trying to get him, see if it could be a rental situation. We've heard Seattle got in there. And then Drury came out and said that it was only ever LA. I was the only team that he would go to. But, just talking to some teams, like there was plenty of teams that were able to talk to his agent about extension. And so if you're getting to the point of talking about extension, it's like, so whether that was just the Rangers trying to drive up the price from LA, being like, well, these guys are going to give us something better and they're open to extension too or whatnot. But like you said, it was always going to be a really difficult spot for them to procure something that was going to be tangible. So, you'd heard the rumors that, they're asking for Will Smith out of San Jose or Ryan Leonard out of Washington. And it's like, well, good luck, right? I want another zero on the end of my contract too, but it's not happening. But when they, so getting a player like Liam Greentree, the organization said that they valued him over, a 2026 or 2027 first round pick because he's an 06 born and he's going to move into pro hockey next year. I'm not sure I agree with that necessarily. Just looking at where Liam Greentree is now compared to when he was drafted. And like, let's be honest, like he is producing at a lower rate than his draft year, 2 years later, in a league that is, dare I say, slightly weaker than it was 2 years ago when he was drafted. It's missing some high-end talent there too. So organizationally, they obviously like the fit. I think it was probably the best that they could do, especially when the Kings maybe became, a little aware that that they were kind of the only team actually had a real chance at doing this. And maybe that hindered their ability or that precluded them from upping the offer. But yeah, big news nonetheless. And what do you think about Greentree going to the Rangers?
Yeah, so like let's talk about the player, right? And you mentioned it, the production is down, and I think that the Greentree is one of those guys that there are moments where he looks spectacular, and there are moments where he doesn't really look like he's as engaged. And I think we've seen him at various international tournaments kind of play his way down the lineup. Like he's given opportunities to play up the lineup, and eventually, things sour. I think some of that's due to, skating ability. Sometimes it's that engagement. The thing is he's a big man. He has it in him to play with a little bit of fire. We've seen instances this year where he's been a little bit more of a hard driving player. He's been a little more physical. He's dropped the gloves a few times. Like there's a number of things that, you can bring that passion out of him. He is the captain of Windsor and has been for the last 2 seasons. He is, I think an intriguing talent in that he is a tremendous goal scorer. Like he has a great shot. He has good vision. He has the ability to get to the net. Hands are really good for a big fella. He's got that nice release. There's a lot of different things that you will like about the player. But he is one of those players where it's going to require so much patience. And now we should note he did have off-season surgery. That can knock a player back in terms of their production. I think Windsor, not having Ilya Protas this year to attract more of the attention. They do have Belchets and they do have Nesbitt, but Greentree is obviously kind of the focal point of the offense. I think there's going to be some days where you're going to love him and some days where you're going to be a little frustrated by him as a prospect. But I think for me, it's interesting. Let's see where the Kings end up in the draft order.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, you're taking something a little more known and maybe you feel like, hey, those numbers are shiny and that's, we're going to be able to pull a little more out of him. But is he ultimately going to move the needle for you in your prospect system in this retool that you have going. He doesn't change things a lot. So I have a question for you, Cam. And we're not doing our normal segments this week, like Beyond Belief and stuff, because we just have too much to run through. But do you think he makes the Rangers opening night next year?
No, I do not. Beyond belief. I guess we'll see.
There we go. We did get it in anyway.
We snuck it in. I guess we see how much they got the forward core, ahead of the deadline and in the summer, because that'll obviously greatly impact it. But do I think he is ready to play in the NHL right now? No, I don't. I don't think he's ready.
No.
And like you mentioned, internationally, right? U18s a couple years ago, World Juniors, like he's a player that when things get speedy, and the NHL is quite speedy, is that if he's not able to be in your top 6 and produce, he's not contributing a whole heck of a lot. And that's why he was pulled out of that World Junior lineup, right? And then he couldn't get back in. It's just like you love him on the power play. You love him when he's got a little bit of space to let that shot go. Absolutely. But I just wonder, and I had a colleague there who mentioned it too, is that like he might be one of these guys that after the shine kind of comes off as like a new player in a new system, and he's moving to the AHL and he's going to get opportunity. And then once that shine comes off, is like, it might be difficult for him to find regular NHL ice over the next couple of years. Is that he doesn't strike me as a coach's dream. How about that?
Yeah. There's not as many places to plug him into the lineup. The versatility isn't quite there. And that's something that's not necessarily something he can't build out more as he becomes a pro, but that's a lot of work to do. The thing that I'll say about Greentree that I think is good, the things that are harder for a player to acquire or teach, which is to say the skill level that he has, the hockey sense that he has, and the scoring ability that he has those. Can you build more of a foundation into his game because that elevates those? And like, there's a player, like, I don't think he's going to be this, but like, that's what Tage Thompson, that was a big problem with Tage Thompson over the course of his career. It's like, he's got that wow factor, but let's build up more of that game beneath it. And he did become, a credible NHL player, star, now an Olympian. But again, like, I'm not trying to say that that's the projection for Liam Greentree, but it's just like, can you build that foundation? I think that, I think he'll challenge for a spot in camp, just because I think players that are acquired in deals like that, you want to give every opportunity. But I do agree. I think the AHL is a better place for him next year to be able to push himself to the next level and to get used to playing against men. It's not as fast as the NHL, but it is fast. It's faster than junior. You got to be ready to go. I think that'll be a good spot for him. I think that they've got a good setup in Hartford. But now you're looking, okay, you got Gabe Perreault, Brennan Othman. Othman is kind of like on the way outside. Berard, there's a lot of different players that are kind of in between right now. I think, Perreault is going to move into a more permanent situation there soon. But now you've got a number of these kind of players where it's like, I really love that offensive element of your game, or, but there's enough there where it's like, is it going to be enough? So it's a tough spot for the Rangers in a rebuilding situation. But in the end, I think that I do think Greentree is a good enough prospect. It's just that I think if you're a Rangers fan, I completely understand disappointment with the return.
Okay, let me riddle you this, believe it or not, or believable,
Oh, I like it. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. Would you have gone Liam Greentree, or would you have rather rolled the dice on a 26 first rounder from LA who currently sits outside of a playoff spot?
Yeah. I think really, if that pick isn't in the top 20, then no, I would rather have Greentree, to be honest with you. And
Greentree,
it's not
over a 21 pick or something like that.
Yeah, because I think that if it's in that 20 range, like, I think that would be regrettable that they didn't get a first rounder. But I really think, in the conversations that we've had, how quickly does it thin out in this draft class? I think it thins out pretty quick. Now, the other thing too, that I think if you're the Rangers and you're kind of thinking about it, it's, timeline to NHL readiness, right?
Yeah.
And I would always want to have the higher upside option. But I feel like if I feel like I can get something out of Liam Greentree, if I feel like I can unlock the elements of his game, I feel a little more confident about that than rolling the dice.
I guess so. Yeah.
But I
Hey,
know you
and
feel, yeah.
well, I mean, just because I don't have to hide it. I'm not super high on the player, and I've had a number of live views on him, and he just doesn't really do it for me. But bigger players do tend to take a little bit longer. It's the foot speed that has long kind of been the biggest
Yep.
issue for me. Outside of like he's such a big body and he doesn't play like a power forward enough. That is always a little irritating, and I probably irritated coaches when I was playing for the same reason sometimes. But when you look at this draft, you're absolutely right. It does thin out, but it's like, is there a world a guy like Xavier Villanueva is sitting there at 20 that you could have had? Or is Vigo Bjork
I mean, there's
there?
definitely a
Or
world.
is Daxon Rudolph there? Like you could get some players, Elton Hermanson, like, or Ilya Morozov. Like, so we're looking at similar, we got big, we got speed, we got young in the draft. Like, I don't know. Maybe if I'm a rebuilding team, I might prefer that, as you have a little more wiggle room, because Greentree, if he goes to the American League next year and he struggles, and then he goes to the American League again the next year and he's still not ready to pop, well, now you got a 22-year-old former first rounder who's already been moved and doesn't have much value. You get yourself a young kid, you get your hands on him early, maybe he pops, maybe he doesn't, but you got a little more leeway to get value for him, a la what LA just did, right? They just turned Greentree into Artemi Panarin.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great argument. It's a great way to go either way, because it's like there are pros and cons to both sides of it. I think I'm guessing too, like Chris Jury's thinking timeline, and it's like who's more likely to play sooner?
Yeah,
and it's probably 20-year-old 6'3"
for sure
scorer. So we'll see. But anyway, but you know what, Cam? We've been talking about all this stuff, all these prospects, and hey, we may be prospects guys, but we're hockey fans at heart. And we're about to start the Olympics, my friend. The Olympics are almost here. NHL players are back. It is the first time since Sochi that we have seen the NHL. It is long overdue. It is long awaited. And now we get our chance to see it in action. And so to close out today's show, I wanted to give us an opportunity to take a little break from the future of the game and talk about what will be arguably the best 10 days of hockey that we have all year long. And certainly the one that is going to create the most chirps, the most, the most potential, rivalries, and who knows what else will come out of this. I hope that we can maintain our friendship when this is all said and done. But we'll see. Yeah, we will find out. It is hanging by a thread here. It is hanging by a thread. So let's go into it. I want to talk first about your homeland, Canada.
The favorites.
Last time we saw them in Sochi, they were dominant. It was a lot. That USA-Canada game was maybe the most boring USA-Canada game I've ever seen. Because Canada made it so, and it was perfectly played to that end. What does this team need to do to win? What is it? Like they have the star power, they have all that, but there are some holes, there are some gaps. There's goaltending is what it is.
That's it.
What needs to happen for Canada to take the gold medal this year?
I identified two things. I think we can just feel secure in the fact that this team is going to score some goals. Just looking at that roster,
I would say so.
They're going to be able to score some goals. I think they're going to be able to defend well too. So I think that's going to be fine. I think that they need to, number one, they got to get stops, right? And goaltending, if it's Jordan Binnington, he has been atrocious this year. Flat out atrocious this year. There is no other there might be another nation. I haven't looked at all their rosters. Italy might have someone who's had a terrible season too, playing in the Italian league. But traditionally you would not be able to get named to an Olympic squad after a season that he is having, but this is Canada, and for some reason they don't produce Brodeurs and Luongos and Waz anymore. But they produced Jordan Binnington, but he did play like a man possessed at the Four Nations. So if he can play even 3/4 of that level, that's probably going to be okay. But they need to get a stop, and they need to be able to pull the chute on the guy who is not getting stops quickly. I don't think there should be any loyalty here. and they need to stay out of the penalty box, because this is
Yeah.
not the Four Nations. This is not run them through the end boards, throwing hands, open and draw 3 fights in 3 seconds, where, whew, got my pulse up. That's for sure. I've never been in such an exciting barn in Montreal as that game, but we're not going to see that here. That is not going to be the case. And now they suddenly have Tom Wilson and Sam Bennett on that roster. And there's going to be some other guys. When you slap that Canadian jersey on, they're highly competitive. They are going to want it, right? Braden Point said it before the Four Nations. He's like, I hope everybody else is playing hard, because I'm about to run through a brick wall for this team. And I'm sure to a man, they're thinking that too. But you got to play smart. You can't come out there in that first couple of minutes and lay that giant open ice hit that gets head contact, and you get 5 in a game, and now you're suspended and the team's got to kill it. Can't pull that kind of stuff. So they're going to have to change a little bit how they play, and they got to stay out of the box. They got to get a save, and I think if they do those two things, I obviously the States are right there, but I think that'll be enough for them to get the gold once again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited, because I think that this is going to be a matchup of two differing teams, but in a lot of ways can play whatever style you need them to play, and
Totally.
that's the fascinating thing. So I can't wait to see what Canada brings to the table. I can't wait to see Connor McDavid in this setting. I can't wait to see Nate McKinnon in this setting. Can't wait to see Macklin Celebrini in this setting. How big of a role is he going to play?
Right.
But I think that the defense and the team, the defense overall and the goaltending, are they as strong as Canadian teams as years past? And I would say, well, we know the goaltending is absolutely not. The defense,
Not even close.
debatable, but really not, because you consider some of the teams that, like, prime Drew
2010
Doughty is a
team?
different,
Right.
yeah, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Niedermeyer, like, oh,
Right.
man.
Pronger,
What a gosh.
Weber.
I don't know if we realized until later how good we had it in 2010. That was unreal. But now let's switch gears. Let's talk about the U.S., because that team, the U.S. team, this is probably the best roster they've ever brought to an Olympics. I mean, you can maybe go back to Nagano when they, did not win, and say, Chelios,
good
Hull,
team.
all those guys were at that. But like you're bringing multiple Norris Trophy winners, you're bringing and candidates. You're bringing Vezina Trophy winners. You're bringing, Art Ross winner. You've got a lot of different things that you haven't had in years past. And so here's what I'll give you what I think USA needs to do to win. And clearly, like, they have an identity. They have a group. I don't think it's definitely not simply a team that is going to grind you into the ground. They have Austin Matthews, Jack Michael, Jack Hughes. You look at the guys in the back end, they have Quinn Hughes, Zach Werenski, all these guys, but you do have, the Kachucks, you have JT Miller, you have, other, players that are going to kind of play that role. But then I just think they have tremendous balance. Their blue line is outstanding. Their goaltending is outside of Russia, who's not in the tournament, the envy of the world. So you've got great goaltending on top of that. And then the questions are going to be, did you bring enough scoring? I think they did. I wasn't really that bent out of shape that they weren't bringing Jason Robertson. If you gave me the choice between Jason Robertson, Cole Caulfield, I might even take Caulfield in that instance, like just for the goal scoring capabilities, and not that Robertson isn't, it's just, there's a different dynamic there. I think the foot speed is a major factor, other things like that. But getting back to, this, I think that they still are, while they are not going to be a grind out team, that physical, small area, dominate the boards, dominate the middle of the ice, that's going to be what's going to go. Because I think Canada probably has the advantage in the transition game. I think USA has an advantage. And we have to keep in mind, there are other teams other than USA and Canada, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, I know it's crazy. It's weird to think about. But either way, I think that they have that ability to play with the skill and the speed and the scoring, and then also play the junkyard dog game if they need to. And so that to me is the balance of that team, the duality of that team. That's how I feel like they can win. It's probably the closest in my lifetime in terms of a team entering a tournament that looks that poised to win to win the whole thing. But they lost the Four Nations in the game that mattered most. How many times does that happen? So yeah. So the one other thing that I'll say about this US team, this is the generation of player that didn't grow up always losing to Canada.
Yeah.
Like they beat them at the World Juniors. They beat them at, now they have a world championship under their belts. Like there's all different things. Like the mystique, these guys fear nobody anymore. There's no mystique about anybody else. They're just going in with swagger. So, but
yeah, I'm with you. And I think that, obviously goaltending, massive advantage, but you can only play one of them at a time. Right. So it doesn't take a whole lot. The Canadian goalies can play well enough and have proven Binnington can get hot at the right times, right? He won a cup getting hot. He won a Four Nations getting hot. Like it's so I think that could be a massive factor if Canada can't find a stop. But if they just play up to level, I think it doesn't tilt the ice too much. I do think the Americans have the advantage on the blue line too. You can call Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes a wash. You might be able to give that edge to Makar. But then they got Zach Werenski, like you mentioned. But the guy that I'm always looking at too, Slavin. Right? How smothering, how absolutely smothering is that player? He is so good. And at that Four Nations, he was incredible. He was frustrating. Nobody wanted to go down his side. You did not. That was, right. I'm sure John Cooper and company were like, you move that puck to the other side when we're entering the zone. You do not enter on Jacob Slavin's side like that because you're not entering. Like he is. And I know he's going to bring his game. So, if they can shut it down, and then like you said, they have, Matthews is a very good defensive forward at his own right. Like they have guys that can play up the lineup, even like Brock Nelson. Like they have these guys throughout, Vincent Trocheck. They can play really strong defense, but then also have the ability for quick strike offense too, right? Like Matthews can smother down low, and then all of a sudden, bang, he's a one-shot scorer too, right? So it's like they have the ability. Like not to say, like obviously, I'm going to be wearing my Joe Sakic from '98 jersey. But the U.S. could certainly win this tournament. Like they are built, like they were a whisker away from the Four Nations. They were the better team in the preliminary round against the Canadians there too. They won that round robin game. It's gonna be fun, right? Like that matchup is everybody's waiting for. And now we can talk about the rest of the teams that could still make some noise. And obviously, this is not just going to be a 2-team tournament, but on paper, she's a bit of a 2-team tournament.
Yeah, it does feel that way. But hockey is funny. Hockey is never
play the game.
Hockey is a tricky sport. So let's talk about the teams to watch out for in this tournament.
Yeah.
I think the other teams in the mix, the Czechs, the Swedes, the Finns, big time. You're always talking about, like Finland always finds their game. That they're in a real tough situation based on some of their losses to injury for this thing. Not having Barkov, that's big. But the Czechs and the Swedes are for sure, going to look really good. Who's the team of that mix that you are most excited about?
I mean, they all have like this. Both the Swedes and the Czechs have guys that are exciting. Obviously, getting to see guys like Pasternak just flying down the wing and letting her rip. Right, like you want to see the. The Sweden's got a couple of young players on that team. I think Rasmus Dahlin has really come into his own. I expect that he's going to be just a tremendous player for them at this event, logging huge minutes. They've got goaltending too for Sweden. It is unfortunate. Like Sasha Barkov is such a hole that you just cannot replace if you're Finland, right? Like that just for my money, like you never want to count them out because they're so scrappy. They're so scrappy. Right. Even when they lack the talent of other nations, they play such a strong team game. They're so well coached. They play well defensively. So it's like, can they eke out a 2-1 win against a team like Canada or the US? They could in the medal rounds. Like that could happen. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's like when I'm looking at guys who can put up points on the board and be able to run with those two big teams a little bit more, because you're going to have to run with them. I'm looking at Sweden, I think.
Yeah, I think the Swedes on paper, they're really impressive. I think that they have a lot of the tools. The team that I'm kind of watching out as that dark horse, that team that could be a spoiler, the team that could pull one of the upsets is the Czechs.
The Germans?
The Czechs. No, not the Germans. But there's like the Germans are. USA's got to play Germany. It's like, hey, there's that is not
don't overlook them.
Easy out there. So you better come ready to play. But I look at Czechia has Pasternak. They have Dostal in net, which I think is an upgrade in what they've had in recent opportunities. I'll be curious about their blue line. They don't have a lot of size on their blue line. They also don't have a fully NHL blue line, but I think there's some really intriguing players there that will help them. And then, we'll see if Radko Gudas takes anybody's soul while he's over there wearing the Czech jersey. Always a possibility. But you look at that and you've got Netchos, you've got you've got a number of players that have played in the NHL. So just because they're
Hronek's
lighter
having
on
a great
NHL
year.
talent, I would not count them out.
No, for sure. They have veterans and the veteran presence there. Even some of those guys like that had played and now like Andre Palat, like that maybe aren't at the peak of their career. Those guys still know how to play and how to show up in big moments too. He's been through the ringer a million times. Like he can get on a sprint for a week and a half, 2 weeks here and play some of your best hockey. So yeah, I think they're going to be a tough out for sure. Past in nation,
no question.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch what the Czechs are going to bring to the table. They're in the same bracket as Canada, so they're going to have a challenging game out the gates. I think they play the opener against each other, if I'm not mistaken. So. And we've seen what happens to the Czech Canada games in these World Juniors. Very different here.
Pretty different.
But yeah, and the other thing too that the Czechs have recently won a World Championship. With a lot of like David Spacek, who plays in the AHL right now. He's on that team largely because he's been awesome at the Worlds, and so they're like, hey, if you can play within our system, so they're gonna come out there. It's gonna be cool. If you're an NHL draft fan, there will actually be something for you to see too. Albert Smits will be playing for Latvia. I don't know how much he'll play. We'll find out. We'll see what kind of ice time he gets. But I hope he plays a bunch, and he's also in the same group against USA. So there will be an opportunity for you to see him. They do have a number of NHL players. Really excited to see what their goaltending situation looks like. They've got a number of options available to them, including Artur Shilovs and Elvis Merzlikins, Kristers Gudlevskis. They have enough to maybe put the fear of God in you a little bit. But Albert Smits is going to be the show. Like, that's what we're going to be watching for. And if he has a big showing at the Olympics, where does his draft stock go from there? I mean, a lot of people are talking about him as the upper tier of the top 10, maybe a top 5 pick. I mean, could this be the opportunity for him to like really put his stamp on the draft here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at what Slafkovsky did in his draft year, right? Like he ran guys over. He was scoring goals and he convinced some teams like this is a top prospect. And now, am I expecting that from Albert Smits? No. But can he play? Could he play 17 minutes a night and show that like I'm already able to handle an American forward like this coming down the wing on me? I can handle Matthew Tkachuk at the net front, or Brady Tkachuk at the net front. I can, like those, like he doesn't even have to put up points. He has to play like smart defensive minutes in his own zone against NHL superstars for a team to be like, what's this kid going to look like at 22? Right. If he's already able to do this, because he just seems to have that demeanor that like nothing phases him. So he's like, I hope somebody asks him like, oh, how do you feel like facing off against Austin Matthews? You'd be like, played against bigger names. I'm not concerned. Just the same quote, hey, that he gave about McKenna.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Right? I would love it. I played bigger. It would be
amazing. I played bigger.
One note on Albert Smits. He is the youngest defenseman on his team by 10 years. He is the youngest defenseman on the team by 10 years. There is the next closest player to him on the roster, Danslok Melis and Sandis Vilmanis, both guys that were part of some really great World Junior teams for the Latvians, U18 teams that have had some success. Albert Smits, 18 years old. He's one of the, they have a huge blue line. They have 2 6'5" guys. They got a couple 6'2". Albert Smits is 6'3". So Latvia will give you reasons to watch, and I'm excited about it all. And Finland, we're not going to count you out because you always are scrappy and you find a way. Switzerland's going to be interesting with a number of key NHL players. Germany with Leon Draisaitl leading the way. Super excited to see what that looks like. Italy is in the thing, so that's fun. It's just fun to have Italy. France is in it as well, so you'll see some familiar faces from years past in the NHL. On France, Alex Texier, the only current NHL player on the roster for France. So yeah, that all starts next week, if you can believe it. We are finally here. The Olympics have begun. The women's tournament started today. Kind of the one bad piece of bad news. Finland had a bad case of the norovirus. Their game against Canada was moved basically to a week. So Canada will have to play back-to-back before the quarterfinals. So not ideal. The NHL is monitoring that situation. I don't think it's going to do anything to disrupt things. Norovirus, not fun if you've ever dealt with it. But that is the only piece of bad news. The other good news, Cam, the rink made it through the first day of action. Both rinks did. There's a smaller rink, and then there's the Santa Julia Arena, which is the one that everybody saw that was like, it's never going to be ready. They made it in the nick of time. I'm sure the logistics beneath the level, not great, but they made it. So that is going to do it for the Olympic thoughts portion. I can't wait for it, Cam. I know you can't wait for it, but what else can you not wait for? What do you guys got cooking over on Elite Prospects?
Oh, we're grinding the pavement right now. This is scouting report season. We will be shifting focus here to cover the Olympics, especially myself too. Doing some stuff for social media and everything like that. Obviously, we'll be monitoring the Gavin McKenna stuff too. And I just really hope with that norovirus thing too. That was the first thing I thought of, is like, they're isolating them. Like, that could rip through the athletes' village. Like, that is a highly contagious bug that is getting passed around. Like you said, I had it maybe 3 months ago. And it's like, it was not a pretty sight for the entire family got knocked down. And that, my first thought was like, whose kid? Hey, whose kid did it?
Yeah.
Whose kid gave them norovirus and they brought it to the athletes' village? Because and some kid gave it to that kid first too, right? So we got to track this back to patient zero. I hope it wasn't me back in November. I'm just hoping that it won't rip through the athletes, because man, oh man, these people, like, so many athletes spend 4 years or their entire lives preparing for this moment. And I was reading this story about some of the Americans there during the COVID one for the women's team, and how just like they've worked their entire lives for these things, and all of a sudden a positive COVID test could strip it all away. So hopefully it doesn't get to that point. We can erase all those things from our memory, and it'll just be a nice, healthy run of games from here on out.
Yeah, let's certainly hope. And I think, if they did everything, isolating and everything, hopefully it all works out. It sounds like the players were isolated pretty quickly, that were dealing with it, including the ones that were in contact with it. So we'll see what happens there. But something worth monitoring. For us over at FloHockey, we will also be covering the Olympics. You'll be able to get some live blogs and other things on FloHockey.tv. A lot of these games are going to be happening while you're at work. So if you can't watch it, we will have some descriptions for you. And also we'll be doing some work on social media. We will also have a daily reaction show on our FAST channel, FloHockey 24/7, which is available on Amazon Prime, Bell 5 in Canada, and then Fubo in both the U.S. and Canada, Amazon Prime in the U.S. only. Myself and Robert Babiak, our new Canadian content creator, will be providing the reaction there daily, mostly at 5:30 p.m. Central. Check out the FloHockey 24/7 channel. Will also be available on YouTube. So lots of fun coming up there. Really excited about that, and a lot more to come here soon as we cover everything from Gavin McKenna to whatever else is going to come next in the draft year, to the Olympics, the prospects, and so much more. That is going to do it for this week's episode of Called Up the Prospects podcast. For my co-host, Cam Robinson, I am Chris Peters. We'll catch you next time.